Hey everyone, Radical Dreamer Steve back at you with another video, and today I'm talking about Triangle Strategy, the new exclusive strategy RPG from Square Enix for the Nintendo Switch. I am so excited for this game. I was waiting for it for months, and I absolutely love strategy RPGs. It might be my favorite genre, not sure. Definitely up there. I've been playing strategy RPGs since the PS1 era, so games like Shining Force 2, 3, FF Tactics, Vandal Hearts 2, Disgaea, Fire Emblem Awakening, Valkyria Chronicles. These are some of my favorite games in the genre. If you like those games as well, maybe you'll find yourself on the same page as me or similar with Triangle Strategy. So this is going to be a review, and I'm ultimately going to be asking, is this the next great strategy RPG you need to play? Very quickly, let's get the name out of the way. Yes, it's terrible. It's based on the three-way conflict between nations. I don't know why Square Enix left the placeholder name there in the end. Definitely could be more creative, more colorful, more interesting. But that ultimately affects the marketing more than the content, so let's move right on. We're going to start with the combat. Whereas most strategy RPG games feature combat as the meat and potatoes with a story that complements the combat, I kind of feel like that dynamic is flipped with Triangle Strategy. The combat complements the story. That said, this game has amazing combat, and every battle feels pretty different, which is actually a tricky thing to do in a strategy RPG. The battlefields range from small to medium, and it really feels like the developers designed each map and conflict to force the player to use a lot of strategy with the characters and tools they have at the moment. When it comes to melee characters, they're pretty typical. It's nothing you've never seen before, but the magic works slightly differently. Yes, there's the same elements like fire and electricity and winds. However, there's some interesting interplay with the environments and the available skills you have. For instance, you can burn tiles to leave them burning, which can hurt enemy soldiers. You can use this sort of as a shield to block soldiers from getting to you without taking damage. You can also electrify puddles, charging them and doing extra damage to foes standing on them. All of this stuff's kind of cool and really kind of lets you play with maps in unique ways. The challenge is just right. It's not overwhelming, but it's definitely a challenge. I reset the battles many times, but that's probably because of my kind of anal retentive nature. I tend to play kind of a Fire Emblem-esque way where I don't like losing characters. If I lose a character I really like, especially early in the battle, I'm definitely going to reset, even if there's a chance I will still win the battle. In most battles, you can lose as many characters as you want as long as you have one character remaining at the end of the battle. There's also not much grinding in this game. You will never really need to grind, though you can do mock battles in your encampment. Your encampment is sort of your place to relax, shop, promote classes, upgrade skills between the battles. After you finish each storyline battle, you'll have a mock battle unlocked where you can practice against your own army. While this sounds kind of lame, the mock battles at least have different objectives. Sometimes you need to wipe out the foes, sometimes you need to stop foes from escaping, sometimes you'll have a trapped character and you need to defeat the enemy general, and so on. So they're actually pretty fun despite the fact that they don't really have any weight to them. That brings me to the classes. Unlike a game like Final Fantasy Tactics where there's a ton of customization, Triangle Strategy has preset classes that cannot be changed. This does make character selection for each battle very, very important. I think this is also where my opinion is going to differ from many people. I think many people fault this game for not giving you that customization, but I think the locked classes really kept the focus on the story, the objectives, and it really lets Square Enix manipulate the battles to create a perfect challenge. Do I miss the extra customization and the extra battles? Sure, definitely that stuff's really great, but I do think there are also some advantages to not having that, and a lot of reviewers are glossing over that fact. Triangle Strategy also has some very unique classes that worked really well. Just to mention a few, there's Huette, who's a bird archer. She's a typical archer, but she sits on a bird. But as you promote her and level her up, her range becomes incredible. Her range covers pretty much the entire battlefield. There's Jens, who's an artisan. He can lay traps that keep enemies from reaching your characters. He can cast nets that slow down foes and push them back in the turn order. Anna might be my absolute favorite. She's a spy. She can attack 2 times, and she can actually cloak herself in plain sight, so that way you can kind of use her in the front lines without her taking damage. Every class in the game actually feels entirely different, meaning you can make a very customizable party, and this keeps the game fresh despite the lack of customization. This brings me to the story and the choices. Triangle Strategy puts a huge emphasis on the story, and I would argue sometimes too much. I really love all the political intrigue, and it's definitely worth investing yourself in the story and the decisions because the decisions you make affect the story branches, which characters you will recruit or not recruit. They're going to affect the endings of the game, so they really affect everything. The story itself is very political. It revolves around three countries building up their relationships after a long war. The foundation of their relationship is on a joint agreement to mine salt together. Salt is the most important commodity on this continent, and you're going to see players from all three nations, and depending on your choices, you are going to find yourself aligned or disaligned with those said nations. There's a lot of little meta commentaries throughout the game too, stuff on kind of like oppression of minorities, what it's like to have responsibility despite having no actual agency, and a lot of other stuff. That said, despite the story being very captivating, you're going to be watching cutscene after cutscene, and it's not rare to spend something like 30 to 60 minutes watching storyline between battles. The pacing can be brutal, and this is especially true in the beginning of the game. It gets a little bit better, but it is sort of hit or miss throughout the rest of the game. One way I found to break it up is you can do mock battles between some of the storyline. That way you're not waiting 50 minutes for the next battle. But I do think the story is going to be the biggest sticking point for players deciding whether or not they want to play Triangle Strategy. Another two crucial parts of the gameplay are exploration and the scales of conviction. With exploration, you can sometimes explore very small sandbox areas. The first thing you can do is find glimmering items that are lingering on the ground. This might be money, consumable healing items, and rings, so you really want to make sure you explore and grab all these items because money is limited in this game. The second most important thing about this is you can pick up crucial information that unlocks options for future choices, which will ultimately steer the narrative of the game. The other aspect here is the scales of conviction, which is used for major decisions. Unlike a lot of games where the storyline will automatically unfold, you are going to have a giant debate with your characters, and you're going to see where their predilections leave them on decisions in question. After that, you can try to sway your characters who are on the opposite side of the argument to your side. In the beginning of the game, I found this pretty easy, but later on in the game, there's actually three choices sometimes, and there was one point where I actually failed to sway my allies to my side. I lost the vote and had to take an action which I totally disagreed with. It was definitely super frustrating, however, it did feel fitting in this game. It reminded me that I am a player in this world, I am not a god, which was actually kind of refreshing since you do kind of play a godlike figure in many video games. The final thing to touch upon is the aesthetics. Yes, they're amazing. They're kind of a glorified SNES look. They're 16-bit, definitely modeled off Octopath Traveler, a game I didn't particularly love, but that's for a different video. And for some reason, they kind of gave me a Tactics Ogre vibe. Not sure why on that one. But the animation's really good. The spells look beautiful. The battlefields are stunningly beautiful. Also, it's kind of artsy. I don't know. Seeing like the murders, there's a lot of characters that got kind of murdered in the game. There's a lot of tragic events, and it feels more artsy because of the graphics. Now, I'm not saying I like to watch people get axed and just enjoy seeing pools of blood surrounding the rotting corpses, but it definitely gave all the events sort of a unique feel that very much fit the aesthetics of the game. Okay, overall, I am giving Triangle Strategy an 8.9 out of 10. The combat feels amazing here. I love the classes, love the kind of like the strategy that was required to beat a lot of the battles. Challenge felt just right, and the story kept me interested throughout the entire game. The one major con, and like I said, that's going to be the sticking point for most players, is the poor pacing. The story can be very pervasive, and it's going to frustrate some players that want to have more of an action RPG and want to see more combat. There's not really optional battles outside of mock battles, so it is a very linear experience. One thing I want to add to this real quick is that I think the comparisons to Final Fantasy Tactics are pretty interesting. I mean, I really want to see a Final Fantasy Tactics remaster or remake. But that said, these are ultimately two very different games, and I think there's plenty of room, even in a crowded strategy RPG universe, for both of these games. I think most strategy RPG fans will enjoy Triangle Strategy, but you need to ask yourself, is the story going to be something that's going to destroy my enjoyment, or is it something that I'm going to be willing to invest myself in? I think that's the ultimate question for people that are on the fence. I do think this is the next great strategy RPG. It's one of my favorite games on the Switch. Doesn't quite break into my 5 to 10 favorite strategy RPG games, but I don't know, that could change in 5 to 10 years if I play this game a few times and see everything the game has to offer. Definitely worth playing, so check this one out. Have you played Triangle Strategy yet? What are your thoughts? If you haven't played it, why haven't you picked it up yet? Alright guys, looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the game. See you next time, and game on.